Hospital Porters, Pride and Dignity, Stop the New World Order. Welcome to Paranormal TV. It's been a while since my last video. I know it was last Monday, so that's almost a week, which is a long time for me to go without making a video. But, so sorry about that, but I just haven't had time. I literally not had time. It's been just so many other things going on. You know, I had to write an article for UFO Truth magazine. That's done now, so I've got a bit more free time. And I was thinking of making a video about Prince Philip's funeral, but I thought I couldn't really say anything. There's nothing really much to say about it. It was they carried him in, they said a few prayers, they carried him out. I mean, it's a funeral like any other. It was a human-sized coffin though, so whether that was Philip in it or not, I don't know. But it was clearly it was a human-sized coffin. The reason I called this video "Something Strange is Going On," and that's because I've just for once, and it's not good for my ego to say this, I am a bit stumped when it comes to predictions. I'm not entirely sure what's going on out there. I'm not all weird stuff. I'll come to that in a minute, the weird stuff. But yeah, there's some. Sorry, I can hear banging around, and it's on the stairwell from the upper flats. It's alright. Yes, maybe that's a sign of what's to come, as I'll explain. But I have a little bit of. I'm in a bit of a situation where I'm used to having a grip on things. You know, I'm used to sort of being in the know, and I'm not really at the moment. Things are getting a little bit confusing in this world, more so than usual. And I'll explain why. But there are no clear predictions. I can only make very, very hedged bets and very rough predictions about what's to come in the next few months, because weird things are going on in the world at the moment over several things. I mean, I'm not even going to get into the coronavirus. I talked about that in my last video. I'm going to talk about other things. I'm going to avoid the UFOs as well. I'm going to avoid the coronavirus and the UFOs for this particular video, even though there are issues associated with both those subjects I can go into. I went into the coronavirus details. Probably, I think I covered it in quite detail in the last video. The UFO issue I will save for my next UFO disclosure video, I think. Yeah. But on top of this is the thing, and on top of all the weirdness that I'm going to talk about in this video, which is going on at the moment, I have to add on top of that I experienced possibly a paranormal event in my own life, right here in my own home, which I'll talk about at the end. Let's get into the political world at the moment. So to begin with, Greenpeace has praised Boris Johnson. Now that you don't normally get that, because Greenpeace are pretty left-wing mostly, but they're actually praising now Boris Johnson for his position on Brexit. They are claiming that now Britain is free of the EU, we can exit the common fisheries policy. Now that is something which I've talked about previously in my previous Brexit videos. I'll probably put a link in the description box to my Brexit portal so that you can actually access that. I will remember to do that. Make a mental note. If I don't put the link in the description box, just let me know, alright, in the comments, and I'll add it, because I'm not going to start making notes now. But the common fisheries policy is basically similar to the common agriculture policy, which is a damn destructive, which is basically where, as it says, the entire empire, the entire Brussels empire, has basically a single fisheries with single access, and it's the ultimate tragedy of the commons, because Britain has very rich fisheries in terms of its waters, but these have been plundered pretty much by other nations, particularly France, Spain, I think, and places like that. Now, the question is, though, I mean, so far, I mean, there's all kinds of other problems as well. Greenpeace are opposed to bottom trawlers. This is specifically where fishing boats drag their nets along the seabed, which has been very, very bad for marine life, and apparently releases a lot of carbon dioxide. I don't care about that, as you know, but Greenpeace are very pro climate change, or pro the causes of climate change. And there's also super trawlers. Now these are enormous vessels, sort of ocean liner sized vessels, which are giant, which not only catch huge numbers of fish in nets a mile across, but they have on board processing facilities. They're like factories. They So when you get back to port, all the fish have been nicely put into cans and things like that. You see, we can ban that. But the thing is, this is what the headlines was: Brexit win, Britain, Britain now free of the EU fisheries policy. But then that hasn't actually happened yet, as I explained previously. So Greenpeace they're being a bit overly praising of Boris Johnson, as I have been in the past. We now have a timetable for exiting the common fisheries policy, but it's not actually happened yet. Now, as I explained in my Brexit videos, which you'll see in the link in the description box, that is the one hole in the Brexit deal that was not plugged. Apart from that, it was a reasonable deal. What will happen? I mean, is Boris going to plug it? That's the question. Is he going to do that? Because, at the moment, there's people far less left-wing than Greenpeace, people like me, for example, who are not happy with the way he's conducting this thing. We're concerned for the environment. We're concerned for the fishing industry as well. That we just allow trawlers from France just to come up here and just catch whatever they want. It's destroyed, especially in the northeast. This is why there was so much pro-Brexit sentiment in the northeast. Now, what happened in the deal, just to summarise, when I go into more details in the actual video, in the Brexit deal video, they just kicked the can down the road. They said 5 years and then we'll get out and we'll have... But we can leave at any moment with a 1 year notice during this period. But so far, Boris has not pressed that button. The question is, why not? Why has he not just simply pressed that button and got us out of the common fisheries policy? Because the 5 year period, it doesn't have to be 5 whole years. And as I've said before, what a disappointment that man has been. Do you remember my optimistic feelings towards him just over a year ago during the election? The 2019 election, I said, well, so the 2020 election, I said, he's going to be, wasn't it? It was November, was it November or December 2019? I said, he's Britain's Trump, and he's not Britain's Trump. I don't believe he was... As I said in my last video, I don't think he basically is a con man. I don't think he started off with the intention to fool the people. What happened was he started off with noble intentions. He started off as Britain's Trump, but he couldn't drain the swamp. The swamp has overwhelmed him, and now he's just in it, mired in it. Whether he can get out or not, I don't know. I mean, if he can get the SAS to rescue his family, maybe he can, but I don't know. We've also got an interesting... a rather frustrating situation in the United States with the so-called President Biden announcing he's going to withdraw troops from Afghanistan, ending the longest war in US history, a whole 20 years, 2 decades. It's just disgraceful. I mean, there's like troops going over to fight over there. They come back, they have children, and their sons are joining them over there who weren't even born when the damn war began. Who've been fighting over there as well. It's insane. It's horrific. But there's all kinds of... Obviously there are all kinds of suspicious things and frustrating things and annoying things related to this. And partly the fact that, of course, as I've said before, Biden... people call him President Biden, but of course he and his administration are basically the demolition team, aren't they? And Biden is simply the public relations officer for the demolition team. So what's he doing? What's he playing at? Well, firstly, as Styx Hexenhammer has pointed out, it's very annoying. What's annoying about it is that it was actually Trump who wanted to pull... He actually did this even in the dying days of his administration. He started bringing troops back from Afghanistan with a commitment to leave, for the last troop to be out, the last soldier to have left Afghanistan by May the 1st. That was his commitment. Now, Biden is now saying, yes, we're going to pull all the troops out of Afghanistan, and it's all me who did it. Oh, it's me. And I thought, what? I mean, how arrogant can you get? Styx was saying this. This was all Trump's doing. He brokered this deal. He brokered this deal. He was talking to the Afghan national government and to the Taliban, who are now sort of rebels, and trying to sort the whole thing out and saying, okay, he'd pull out by May the 1st. He'd just withdraw. He'd end the whole intervention by May the 1st. So he sorted it out. He leaves office. you know, demolition man comes along and starts claiming credit for it. Like it was all his idea. Now what's weird is that Biden was the one who was opposing this. Biden is the most hawkish president, or the most hawkish politician the US has. He supported every damn he supported every damn intervention in his entire career. So why? Firstly, it's annoying that he's claiming credit for what Trump has done. But why is he doing this at all? Because I mean, I said, you know, as soon as Biden's in the White House, those troops, as soon as they get off the plane from Trump's withdrawal, Biden's going to be waiting on the runway saying, get back on that plane and go home, get back over there. So the question is, why is Biden now suddenly talking about pulling the troops out of Afghanistan? This is why I said that it is unpredictable. I can't make really a prediction of what's going on here. There are only numerous possibilities. One thing's for certain, he doesn't want US troops out of foreign theatres of operation. He doesn't want that. He wants them there. The whole purpose of the globalist enterprise is to keep America perpetually at war, which it has done now for well over 100 years. America has to always has to be completely at war. America, you know, like the tradition of the United States is it's not an aggressive nation. Traditionally, it was not founded on aggressive principles. There's always been a large proportion of the American public, and there still is, which is essentially isolationist and pacifist. This was what President Roosevelt was saying in the run-up to World War II. He was pandering. He was actually pandering to this isolationist and pacifist sentiment within the American people. I tell you, sons, and I tell you, mothers and fathers of America, your sons will not be fighting in any war in Europe. He was promising to keep America out of World War II. Then what happens? Oh, Pearl Harbor. Which, it's only in recent years the truth about that whole event is coming out, about how it was an engineered event. It wasn't a false flag, Japan did it. But you can see the Americans were quite pleased when that happened, and they goaded them into doing it. It's all Ian R. Crane, the late great Ian R. Crane, has talked about this in detail. So I spilled a little bit of my dragon juice. Just knock that up quickly with my foot. Yeah, I'm not going to let it break my stride in terms of video making. But yeah, so the idea that a globalist agent in the White House would somehow would be the great peacemaker who would end all this, is impossible. It's against their raison d'etre. The only president actually who did take serious steps to ending the situation was Trump, because he knew that was what was needed. He knew that the first thing you're going to do if you're going to save your country is get it out of its perpetual wars. Go back to the original plan for the United States, which was, defend itself. Kellogg-Briand Pact. The fact the United States is geographically isolated, it's in a very strong position with a shining sea to the east and west, and friendly nations to the north and south. These are the only countries that are anywhere near the US. Everything else is thousands of miles away. The United States is very geographically isolated. It's in a perfect position to be a secure nation in its own right, free from foreign invasion. Yet, they have to keep the war drums banging, sending young men off to die, and sometimes it's women now as well. They're sending off to die sometimes in war. It's just that no one ever. When's anyone ever going to put a stop to it? Well, Trump tried to, didn't he? The idea is like you could just get. I mean, the problem is human rights groups have spoken out against this. They're actually quite keen on the US. Human rights groups with especially for women's education and things like that, because the Taliban basically banned women from going to school. Remember Malala? But you see, what Trump was saying was, he was basically saying, okay, we've done what we can. We spent 20 years trying to sort your country out. We're now going to withdraw, and you're going to have to deal with it yourself. We'll continue to be allies of the Afghan national government, but we're not going to fight your wars for you. And the human rights groups say, no, you can't do that, because then the civil war will start again and the Taliban will take over again. I said, well, what? you see, a lot of Americans have said this, that's a terrible thing, but what? Why is that our fault? Why is that America's fault? This is the exact opposite of the neoconservative position, which says, well, it is America's fault because America has a duty to basically run the entire world. Of course, that was the New World Order agenda in those days, which no longer is the case. Now their plan is to knock America down. Funnily enough, I mean, I learnt this from Styx. Afghanistan, the nickname for Afghanistan is Graveyard of Nations, because it seems that every nation that invades Afghanistan falls apart. I mean, the most recent example is the Soviet Union. It literally, within 10 years of invading that country, it was collapsing. And now, of course, it did collapse. But it goes back much further. I mean, you could trace it back to Alexander the Great. I mean, look what happened. He went over the Khyber Pass into the region of the Seven Rivers, you know, and soon after that he was lying on his deathbed in Egypt. And of course the Alexandrian Empire was a very, very short-lived enterprise. I mean, Alexander went out and conquered half the world, but then it didn't last. His reign didn't last long. It certainly didn't survive his own death very, very long. That's a big subject. Michael Wood has done a good documentary about Alexander the Great. So, what's going to happen now? Well, it could be what Biden has done in his, you know, in his self-backslapping, you know, glowing, self-congratulatory and everyone else kissing his ass kind of moment when he says, I'm withdrawing the troops from Afghanistan. It was all my idea, you know. Trump was going to keep them there. Trump was the warmonger. Trump started 50 new wars while he was president, you know. And of course, in this day and age, Oceania has always been at war with East Asia. Eurasia are our allies. You could go up to people in the street now, I guarantee you this, and they will say literally, "Oh yeah, Trump was terrible when it came to war." You know, do you remember the United States invading Norway under Trump in 2016? The first thing Trump did, he sent troops to invade Norway. They invaded France. They invaded Ireland. You know, I lost my son in the war in Portugal. Trump's war in Morocco. It was terrible. Memory's literally that short. Yep, Airstrip 1. Welcome to Airstrip 1, guys. So Biden is now, he's now walking through showers of ticker tape and flowers for being the great peacemonger. But all he has done, the only actual thing is he's done, he's actually delayed what Trump did and what Trump brokered, the deal that Trump brokered. All Biden has done is delayed it for 5 months. Now, is something going to happen between May and September? May is only a couple of weeks away. It was all supposed to happen in about 2 weeks, May the 1st. May Day, very appropriately. Between now and September, is something going to happen, which is going to keep the troops in Afghanistan? I mean, the lie is being told that basically it's because of Afghanistan and bin Laden that 9/11 happened. So, well, bin Laden's dead, but I'm sure they could come up with some other boogeyman to replace him. And is something going to happen now on American soil? Some kind of attack? Which is going to say, well, Biden's going to go on TV and said, oh, you know, I said I was going to bring the troops home. Well, I'm afraid I can't do that now because the Taliban have attacked us and their agent, Mohammed Evil Al-Turban, is still at large. And so we have to go and get him, or something like that. Is that going to happen? Is there going to be some kind of terrible event on American soil? And there is going to be a Mohammed Evil Al-Turban wandering loose, which America has to track down. Is that going to happen between now and September? Again, no predictions. It is too close to call. Because there's another possibility. The troops are needed for another conflict in another theatre entirely, and could it be Europe? Now this is really awful. I mean, the great Tulsi Gabbard, who's way too good for the bloody Democrats. I don't know why she doesn't switch parties, or become a Trumpist. Because I mean, she is basically a Trumpist in all but name. She was being interviewed by Tucker Carlson the other day, talking about the dangers of America getting involved in Russia, because Biden did a speech. It was actually the same speech where he's announcing he was bringing the troops home for Afghanistan, where he also announced he was going to impose sanctions on Russia for their aggressive actions against Ukraine. Now, I've had people asking me about this. I've had people in the comments sections asking me, Ben, you're going to comment on the Ukraine crisis? You're going to comment on the Ukraine crisis? And yeah, I am, because this is something completely. This is something that Nick Collestrom's talked a lot about. And I urge you to go to Paranormal Radio and listen to the last 2 interviews I did with Nick Collestrom. I'll have to do a 3rd one soon, I think, because he's been covering this in detail. That basically this whole thing with Ukraine is just another attack against Russia, who basically is in the same ballpark as Trump right now. Putin is the Russian Trump, really, and that it's another way of keeping this agenda going and justifying the existence of NATO. Because what happened was, we've had all kinds of things happening which Nick has covered in detail. For example, the Amesbury poisonings. Yulia and Skripal, what's his name, Skripal Senior and Yulia Skripal, his daughter, poisoned, apparently by Novichok. And there was a third, there was some collateral damage. Dawn Sturgis, who Nick is currently trying to investigate her death, because there's been no coroner's verdict on her at the moment. It's still an open case, yet the media are reporting on it like it's all done and dusted. She was actually caught up in this by, well, she touched a door handle or something like that, and and actually picked up Novichok poisoning and died. But Nick is suspicious of this, what's going on there, very, very much indeed. I actually put a comment on Nick's article on his Truth Seeker website, and I explained basically, I think Dawn Sturgis is basically a British George Floyd. She is somebody who was in the wrong place at the wrong time, or the right place at the right time, depending on your point of view, to be used simply as a convenient death for an agenda. It's rather like in RoboCop, where someone at some point says, when they're planning to build a human robot cyborg out of a dead policeman, and they say, what can we do? And they say, we have to wait. We've got everything set up. We just got to wait until some poor sod volunteers. In other words, a policeman is killed in the line of duty, and we can take his body and use it, which is basically what they did to George Floyd, and they're doing it to Dawn Sturgis. You hear everywhere that it's Russia is being aggressive towards Ukraine. Russia occupied Donbass and Crimea. This happened in 2014. It sparked off this war, the first phase of this war. And if you remember, it was also there was that strange incident where a Malaysian Airlines airliner was shot down. Do you remember that? It was literally just a couple of months after one went missing. Do you remember, in Indonesia? I can't remember the numbers of the flights, but there was a Malaysian Airlines that went missing in Indonesia, took off and flew off somewhere, and no one knows where it is. And then this plane was shot down over Ukraine, and it was blamed on, well, it was a Russian missile apparently, and they're not going as far as to saying Russia shot the plane down, but near enough, because they're saying basically Russia's assets in Ukraine did it, because there are militias in Ukraine who basically are ethnic Russians who live in Ukraine. Because, as you know, the whole area around, that whole area of Eastern Europe, when you go in Eastern Europe, the borders have shifted so much in Eastern Europe over the last 100 to 150 years, that the ethnic map of Europe is very, very different to the political map. So, for example, there are Hungarian people in Romania, and there are Germans in Poland, and there are Germans in Czechoslovakia, famously, in Czechia, the Czech Republic, the Sudetenland, things like that. And you go further east, there's no exception. You find Russians in modern Ukraine. You find Ukrainians in Russia. I mean, I'm sure you do that as well. And this tension has been exploited because, of course, the Russians in Ukraine are a minority. The ethnic Russians, they're Ukrainian politically. Russian ethnically, they speak Russian rather than Ukrainian, for example. And there's a lot of people actually forget where this started, where this all kicked off, because that's what often happens with wars. They go on for so long that people forget how they started. It actually started with something called the Euromaidan, which is a protest which led to the resignation of the president of Ukraine. And this was all to do with that favourite bête noire of mine, the EU. Because Ukraine had always been part of what's called the Commonwealth of Independent States, which was the name originally given to it when the Soviet Union ended. Basically, all the constituent nations of the Soviet Union, which hadn't become independent before December 1991, which is when the Soviet Union was formally disbanded, they all became what's known as the Commonwealth of Independent States. I mean, many of them became independent after that, but there were some pretty horrible wars going on. For example, in Chechnya, some of it was quite brutal. Some of it was very brutal indeed. And I'm not sure exactly where Ukraine actually ended up in terms of this particular division, but Ukraine is independent, yet it's always had a lot of cultural links. It's always been part of the political league, which includes Russia and its allies and its surrounding nations. So even though it's not part of Russia itself, the Russian Federation, it's always been like a close ally. But then this idea came along, well, maybe Ukraine should form tighter associations with the EU, abandon Russia, turn its back on Russia. So I don't have all the details here. I'm sorry, I didn't get every single detail here, but you can look these things up. Nick has covered it in great detail. If you go to the Terror on the Tube website or the Truth Seeker website, basically the EU basically wanted closer ties with Ukraine, and indeed even suggested that Ukraine could become a member state of the EU, in other words, cease to exist as a nation altogether. At the same time, there's this division between people. A lot of people actually in Ukraine, especially the ethnic Russians, wanted to maintain that close link with Russia, which basically had been it's only recently Ukraine became independent, because Ukraine had been, of course, a constituent part of the Soviet Union and indeed the Russian Empire before that. So basically, fighting broke out. That Malaysian Airlines was shot down. The Malaysian Airlines plane was shot down. Mostly Dutch people on board. It came from Amsterdam. Russia was blamed. Putin was blamed. They said Putin basically supplied the Russian rebels in Ukraine with weapons. That was the story. This is the same time Russia was being blamed for everything else. You know, poisoning. A few years later, it was poisoning in Britain. It was hacking various elections and things like that in the United States. Oh, it's Well, my point here is it possible that the reason Biden is not actually bringing the troops home from Afghanistan, he is redeploying them. This is another possibility. Either they're going to stay in Afghanistan before September the 11th because something happens, or they'll be redeployed to Europe to back up Ukraine. And this is what Tulsi Gabbard was afraid of, because if that happens, that could lead to a direct confrontation between the United States and Russia, which basically is Cold War II, as it's been called, which is a good name for it, going hot. And that, of course, means Armageddon. If it gets really bad, it could mean an exchange of nuclear weapons, which would be the end of us all. Oh dear. Honestly, if you could go back to like the peace protesters in the 60s and that, saying, you know, guys, you know, in the Cold War will eventually end. It's going to end much sooner than you think. And they'll go, oh wow, man, you come from the future. What's it like to live in a peaceful world? And I'll go, oh dear, I hate to break it to you, mate, but because, as Nick said, there seems to be some kind of agenda to keep the Cold War II going, and this is why NATO still exists. NATO is a product of the Cold War. It emerged after World War II. If you remember from my previous video, I talked about Admiral Hill Norton, the UFO guy, who was on the organising committee of that particular group, as was Air Marshal Sir Peter Horsley, who met an alien. He was the guy I talked about this in my Prince Philip video, who actually met an alien in London, This was Prince Philip's personal assistant. So we got this guy Alexei Navalny. Now this is he's a Russian opposition leader. He's anti-corruption apparently, and he has made something called Putin's Palace, which is on YouTube. It's in Russian, but it basically talks about how Vladimir Putin is basically a horrible president. He's corrupt. It's like a big expenses scandal. He's used it to build this luxury retreat in on the Black Sea coast, things like that. Excuse me. Navalny sort of supposedly exposing all this sort of thing. Then what happened was Navalny was poisoned. Do you remember? He was hit by Novichok. Apparently, he picked it up from a water bottle or something, and he was on a plane when he fell ill, having been poisoned. And so what did they do? They took him to Berlin, Germany, and treated him there rather than in Russia. And Nick Colostrum, now again, go to her Panmo Radio. I'll put links in the description box of this. Go to her Panmo Radio. I've done an interview with Nick about this, about how Navalny may not have been the Russian FSB, the security services in Russia that poisoned him, because we've had numerous poisoning. We've had Litvinenko poisoned by polonium. Do you remember that? We've had the Skripals, as I've said, and now we've got Navalny all blamed on Russia. When is there any evidence Russia actually did it? What would they have to gain? And Nick thinks that this is all about NATO, or it's connected to NATO. I don't want to misquote him, but basically Navalny's now in the Gulag, which, well, it's a correctional labour facility. But funnily enough, supposedly he's been persecuted by the Russian government and charged with treason. Yet this is how it's being reported. But Navalny only got 2 years. He's only getting 2 years in this place. That's his sentence, and apparently the sentence is simply because he skipped bail originally on his original sentence, which was nothing to do with treason at all. You do have free speech in Russia. You've got more free speech in Russia than you do in most other countries now. So I hear, and it wouldn't surprise me. But anyway, you're 2 years in there. They're not called gulags anymore. I mean, it sounds horrible, but I imagine that. I don't know specifically, but I'm guessing that these institutions have improved slightly since the days of Solzhenitsyn. I think he's... Anyway, within 2 years he'll be out, he'll have the shackles will be taken off his legs, and he'll be able to put down his pick and shovel and sort of like stagger in his ragged clothes, sign a piece of paper with his frostbitten fingers and be allowed to return to civilization. But, he's now blaming Putin for poisoning him again. Is there any evidence it was actually the order of the Russian government that poisoned Navalny? But you see, Nick thinks, this could all work out so much better. I mean, in this post-Cold War world, there's no need for these things to happen. It's just like with Biden and Afghanistan. There's no need. Essentially, one thing they could do, if to sort out Afghanistan, when they pull out, stop funding the bloody Taliban, stop giving them weapons. If they do that, then things will be a lot better. But the globalists keep giving these people money. They keep giving money to ISIS, giving money to the Al-Nusra Front. It was actually Trump that uncovered this and stopped the CIA supporting the Al-Nusra Front in Syria. And Britain is doing the same in Yemen, and it's supporting the Saudi government, Saudi Arabia, in its attack on Yemen. I mean, this is disgusting. I mean, Keir Starmer, he's not a hero of the left, but he's like I don't think he's anyone's hero. I can't imagine him being a hero. He went on a fact-finding trip to Saudi Arabia when they're bombing schools and hospitals in Yemen with British weapons. Oh, there's an interesting... I don't have time to tell you now, really, but there's an interesting story connected to Keir Starmer and Jimmy Savile as well, which was that basically when Keir Starmer was Attorney General... it's a long story. Basically, Jimmy Savile might have actually ended up in jail if some people are saying because Keir Starmer basically was behind the motion to prevent that prosecution going ahead, that investigation going ahead. So NATO, that's not really needed in the post-Cold War world, is being kept going by turning Russia into another big bad boogeyman. Sorry, my eyelids are twitching. Sorry. Basically, it's like we're in the Red Scare without the Reds. And that's what they want. They want to really keep. They want to kind of basically that restore that Cold War mentality. That's what they're talking about. This is why they're doing it. And all this stuff we do with Ukraine and to do with Navalny is all about that. To keep that ticking over. And also there's various other things, like the crash in oil prices a few years ago was actually designed to sabotage the Russian economy. And 1,800 oil workers in Canada lost their jobs. I've talked with Trevor Murray about this on the third rail radio program. Now at the moment there's this pipeline called Nord Stream, which connects Russia to Germany. Basically, there's a pipeline running along the bed of the Baltic Sea. It leaves Russia at the Gulf of Finland, in the St. Petersburg area, and it goes all the way along the bed of the Baltic Sea to Rostock in Germany, and it delivers natural gas to Germany. Let's talk about building a second pipeline called Nord Stream 2, which, if it goes ahead, will eliminate Germany's dependence on imported US shale, which is currently using for fuel. Germany has a lot of renewables, but it also uses shale gas. And I think that may be another reason why they're doing this, because of Nord Stream 2 pipeline. But again, I don't know. See, there's multiple possibilities. I don't know which is the right one. We'll have to wait and see. I think we'll know within the next few months, and maybe I can do an update video called "There's Not Something Strange Going On." I know what it is now, and I can make a prediction. But anyway, I think maybe I should get on and discuss my own personal paranormal strangeness, which is the strangeness going on in my own personal life, which happened recently. Now, this is not certain. I don't have I can't say this with any certainty that something weird happened, but last week something weird did happen to me, which may be paranormal. It's one of these strange things where it's nothing significant. It's not, there's no like ghostly being appearing in my room, or a flying saucer hovering over my house, or something definite you can get your teeth into. It's more kind of synchronicity, a weird event that happened. What happened was, okay, I've been reading some books lately as research, and I won't go into detail. I won't even tell you what the books are, because I want to do like a proper review of these books at some point, probably on the Paranormal Voice blog, and I will mention it on Paranormal TV as well, though, because I know never the twain shall meet. A lot of you who watch me now don't read Paranormal Voice, do you? And vice versa, I think. So I'll have to do it on both. But basically, these books I've been reading are about sort of occult subjects and demonology, and the one in particular I ordered is about the Antichrist. It's a book about the Antichrist. I'm studying the whole concept. This doesn't mean I'm going to get into organised religion, because I'm not, but I am interested in the whole idea of the Antichrist. I think you don't have to be some Bible thumper from Missouri to be interested in this sort of thing. I think there is something going on to do with the Antichrist, and it's not Professor Brian Cox, all right? He's a horrible, obnoxious man, but he's not the Antichrist. But anyway, I'll go into that in more detail. I'll talk more about these books in a future video when I finish reading them, basically, which will be a few weeks to a couple of months. But anyway, what I've been doing is, because I'm short of time, I've been listening to them on Audible. I actually downloaded Audible, and I've been listening to them on my player, which is good, because basically I'm very, very lucky in this respect, and maybe some of you are as lucky as me in this respect, but I've got the kind of job where I can actually do this while I'm working. I can, because my garden, it involves things such as gardening, house cleaning, dog walking, things like that. So basically I can put earphones in my ears and listen to things while I'm working. Now, some people listen to music, other people listen, and I tend to listen to radio shows, and in this case audiobooks. So I've basically been reading, by listening to audiobooks, these various things on Audible while I've been working, so which is great. It speeds up the amount of information I can take in. Anyway, last week I realised that this book on the Antichrist I wanted, I saw it advertised and I thought I've got to read that. I've got to read that. I've got to read it, or listen to the audiobook of it. So I went on to Audible and it wasn't there. It's not available on Audible. I thought, oh, damn! I thought, damn it. You know what I'm going to have to... And I started looking for other options and I realised, damn it, you know what I'm going to have to do? I'm going to have to buy the bloody paperback. I'm going to get a good old-fashioned book. I'm just going to have to read it like this. Oh, this is good. Dennis Wheatley. I started reading Dennis Wheatley as well. I've got a proper book up here. Whoops! I've got the proper book here of Dennis Wheatley. He was right about the occult and stuff. But I realise I'll have to just get a paperback of this book and read it rather than listen to it. So I ordered the paperback of this particular book on Amazon, because it's the only place you can buy books these days. And I ordered it and it said, yep, delivering on this particular day. I thought, great, okay. And you see, because I used Amazon Prime for this, you can have tracker. It has like tracker, so you know exactly where your parcel is. It says order processing, and then I'll get an email. You might be interested to know your order has been dispatched. I thought, great. You probably have this experience yourself when you order things on Amazon. And then it said, oh, your order will be delivered later today, sometime between 1800 and 2100 hours. Great, I thought. And then suddenly a map appears. Now, does this ever happen to you? Does it with my Amazon? A map appeared where it says, oh, your parcel is going to be delivered. The van delivering it is just 7 stops away from you. And I thought, brilliant, great. And it says, now it's just 5 stops away from you. And I thought, brilliant. I'll tell you what I'll do. I says, I'll go out into the kitchen and I was going to make some dinner, so I'll go into the kitchen and make some dinner. And from the kitchen, I can't actually quite. From the door, I look out and I can see the front door, and so I know when something's coming. And so I started cooking some food and thinking to myself, oh, it's only 5 stops away when I last looked at my computer in my room. So I'll just cook some food here and then I'll be here when it arrives. And then what's weird is, like, and I was just cooking away and suddenly I hear a thump. Now, you can actually hear like letters and things dropping out through the letterbox from where I am in the kitchen. It's quite a small place we've got here. And so I could hear, oh, that's it, it's arriving, I thought. I should point out that even though I live in a block of flats, but the bottom flat, I live in the ground floor flat, which has a front door that accesses the street directly. The other flats, you have to climb up a stairwell to get to the 2nd and 3rd floor flats. Or the first and second floor flats, rather. And that's why Alan lives above me, and that's why I heard noises on the stairs. You can actually hear people, if they make too much noise on the stairwell, you can actually hear them in my room. So my own front door opens directly onto the street, so the postman just simply has to put it through the letterbox. And so I was cooking in the kitchen, and I thought I heard this noise thump, which is the sound of a large package dropping through the letterbox. And I thought, oh good, it's arrived, I thought. I swear, this is weird. This is where it gets weird, because I heard that sound. And so when I finished cooking, I went out to look, and there was nothing there. And I thought, oh, I must have been mistaken. I must have been mistaken. They haven't delivered yet. And so I went to my bedroom and where my computer is, and I looked at and I thought, well, it's probably only going to be 2 or 1 stop away now, because I've been cooking for the last 20 minutes. And so I open up Amazon and it says parcel delivered. And I thought, what? And so I went out and I check and it's not there. Remember, I heard it land, and then that parcel, and I went and had a look. It's not there. It's not there. I went back to the computer. I checked. No, parcel delivered. Definitely handed to a resident, they say, which basically means it's just put through the letterbox by the delivery man. I thought, what? And so immediately I protested. I wrote back and I said, look, the parcel hasn't been delivered. I'm waiting for them to get back to me on that. And I thought, oh, damn it. That means I can't get hold of this book on the Antichrist. Because I ordered it, was delivered, and it hasn't turned up. I thought I heard it land. I thought I heard it being coming through the letterbox. I must have been wrong. And then suddenly I go back to Audible, and you'll never guess what. I find the book I'm looking for on Audible. Weird, very weird. I am. It's almost as if I don't know. And maybe I was mistaken when I heard it being posted through the letterbox, and maybe it just got lost. But I mean, normally they'll tell you if things get lost. I mean, Amazon Prime are quite good. They say if they deliver it, they put it through the letterbox. They'll say it's put through the letterbox. They didn't say, oh, we hid it under your doormat or something like that, and you have to go out and get it. And if it's not there, it means someone saw the delivery man doing it and stole it. They said it was handed to a resident. In other words, it's a safe delivery. And I heard it come through the letterbox, and I went out and checked, and I saw it wasn't there, and I assumed I was mistaken. And I go and find it on Audible. It's almost like the book was delivered to me, but then it vanished in a puff of smoke or something from my doorstep. And I go back to Audible, and I go back and I look on Audible, and it's the first thing that comes up because they knew I was searching for it. It was in the search box. So suddenly this thing, normally I said no, search complete, no items found. It suddenly says, yeah, I didn't even it was not even in the search box. It was in the bloody ads on the homepage. This book on the Antichrist, and I've been listening to. I've been listening to it ever since. It's almost, but it's weird because it's almost like I ordered the book arrived, but then suddenly the book disappeared and it appeared on Audible. It's weird, kind of almost Mandela effect like thing. Of course, it may be I have simply made a mistake, and there is what Steve Mera insists on calling a rational explanation for what I've just experienced. But it's just a weird piece of synchronicity. It's one of these creepy, uncanny eventualities that makes you wonder how the universe really works. If anything like that happens, let me know what you think in the chat bot, in the comments, because I'd love to know if you've had anything similar happen to you. I know my good friend Gareth Davis, who we've just done a mindset podcast where he talks in that show about something like that which happened to him. So you just go to mindsetcentral.com and you will listen to it. Me and Gareth discussed this thing on that show. But if something like that's happened to you, please let me know if you think of another explanation for what's happened. Because I'll tell you what, I know for a fact it's not in any of the other flats. I've asked around. I've asked Alan. I've asked the person on the top floor. They haven't had it. I actually even went to the next block and I asked them, and they haven't had it. It was because my first thought was maybe they put it through another letterbox by mistake. That has happened actually. My neighbours are quite good though, because every time that's happened in the past, my neighbours do come and they come and they let me know, and they put it through the letterbox for me and things like that. Which I thought might have happened this time, but it hasn't. No one's been round saying, "Hey Ben, guess what was put through my door? It was directed to you. It was directed to you." And what's more, another possibility was, of course, that Ahmed or Hassan might have picked it up. But then they'd have told me. What we have like pigeonholes. There's like a pigeonhole for me and for Ahmed and Hassan by the door, and there's a blank one which used to be jellies, which we just put the junk mail in now. And so I know for a fact that if they'd done this before, they would have simply put it in my pigeonhole. And what's more, Ahmed and Hassan were out on that day. I know they were out. I was alone in my home. I was home alone, and something weird happened. Anyway, let me know what you think. Skeptic or believer alike, I'm interested to hear what your explanation is for my rather strange little semi-paranormal experience. I'll be back with another video as soon as I can think of something to make a video about, or maybe a live stream or something, you know. Sorry about the lack of activity on the channel. I do. I did put up a notice though, actually, thanking everyone for their support with Andrew Johnson, because of course Andrew Johnson's video about me, I did say, look, for those of you who went to him politely and calmly defending me, I appreciate that. I'm not going to say anything myself because, as I explained in the last live stream, I don't want to regurgitate and stir up trouble related to Ian, because Ian's had his funeral, he's at rest, and I don't want anything disturbing that. But at the same time, I have to, you know, if I've been lied about by somebody, I appreciate the people who've been defending me. That's all I said. So, yours until the next point of interest. Thank you for watching Panwo TV. Hospital Port as pride and dignity. Stop the New World Order.